What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is a talented public speaker. He's the author of 5 books, including Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity, which is also one of my favorite books. He's 35 years been consulting, training, and coaching in the US and globally. He's the founder of the David Allen Company, and he's a personal hero of mine because his methodology has helped me achieve great things and make the world a smaller place. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome David Allen. Welcome, David.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Thanks for the invitation. Always delighted to hang out with somebody like you and chat about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored to hang out with someone like you because it's not often you get to hang out with your hero or one of your heroes. And so my personal journey with getting things done, and I know you've heard me say it was 12 years, I guess it was about 12 years ago, my son was born, and a mutual friend of ours, Danny Passman, had a luncheon out in LA. And he was on a podcast with you or something. He's like, come to this thing. And my wife, Alexa, was like, even though my son Theo was just brand new, she's like, no, you have to go because you're a whole different person since you picked up that book and started implementing GTD and the art of stress-free productivity. And I think that's just a testament to how much of an impact you've had on my life and also my wife's life and my whole family's life.
Mine too. Okay.
And I think while this podcast is about hospitality and defining hospitality, you know, most of the people that I'm working with in furnishing hotels, they're all really incredibly creative human beings, right? From interior designers, architects. And what I found through GTD is there's this idea of a clear white space, which to me is like ultimate creativity. Now, while I might not be creating beautifully built environments, I'm a part of that. What GTD has allowed me to do is like become a better writer, allowed me to create this podcast, it's allowed me to start a bunch of different businesses and be
How about a better parent?
A better parent?
Creative,
well, my kids might argue with you on that one.
How creative can you be other than that ministry to bring souls onto the planet and have that responsibility to train them?
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think that as I look at all of these people who have benefited from getting things done, it's what's so important is about getting to that ultimately creative place. And I feel like, you know, this idea of where our brain is only designed to hold 4 things. We are often overloading our brain with things that don't matter, which prevents us from being in that creative place. So tell me about your journey with getting things done and how you have kind of gone full steam ahead into this ultimate creative place by using this, and then how you're impacting entrepreneurs and other human beings around the world.
Well, if we had about 2 months, I could then fill in the story, but I'll try to freeze dry it a little for you, Dan, here. Basically, I got very much attracted and engaged in what clear space was like, getting a black belt in karate when in my 20s, where it was critical that you clear your head. If you get attacked by 4 people in a dark alley, you don't want 2,000 unprocessed emails hanging around your psyche. So you need to be clear. So all the stuff the mindfulness people are studying, focus on your breathing. But I learned that 40 years ago. Yeah, that's what you do. You want to get present. You want to get clear. And there may be a spiritual reason for that. Could be if you're focused in that world. But there's a very practical reason for that. The clearer your head is, the more you're able to deal with surprise and change, and to recalibrate and to refocus and be present with whatever you're doing. So that's the whole idea about being present. That's the optimally productive state. And being present doesn't mean you work harder. It just means you can take a nap without having anything on your mind. Or you can watch your girl play soccer without having to be on your iPhone. or you can, or you can do cook spaghetti better, or hire a vice president better, or decide whether to get divorced or adopt or not better. So those are all, super, creative decisions that you need to make. But the clearer your head is, so that your brain is not taken up with, cognitive stuff that's taking up real estate that you need to have for other things. Other things meaning if you have a clear head, there's no system that can give you the answer to a strategic, intuitive judgment call about what to do. That's you. That's the only system called you as a human being. There's no system that's going to make that decision for you. You have to do that. But a systematic way to engage with all the other things in your life that are taking up cognitive real estate, that's strategic to do. And if you don't give appropriate attention to anything that has your attention, little or big, it's going to take more attention than it deserves. If cat food pops into your head more than once, you're inappropriately engaged with your cat, right? So cat food should pop into your head once. Oh, we need cat food. What do? Put it on a Post-it on the fridge. Whoever goes to the store gets cat food. I am now appropriately engaged, as opposed to 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh my God, the cat's in my face because they're starving. Well, so dealing with the small stuff is as critical as dealing with the big stuff in a strange way, in a kind of a Zen sort of a way.
So as we were speaking earlier, I mentioned that, this idea of defining hospitality, okay, you can look it up and see a definition, blah, 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 whatever. But to me, it's much more than that. And all of these discussions I've been having with these amazing guests, who, from entrepreneurs to architects, designers, hotel operators, bartenders, there's this idea that kind of, and a thread that runs through everything, where it's this idea of, okay, if we're hospitality, somehow we have to be open-hearted and attentive, and empathetic to really hear what's going on. And again, I haven't really figured out the full definition, because these conversations are helping me do this. But David, how do you define hospitality?
Well, when I think about when I have felt hospitable, or being hospitable toward with people with me, it was heartfelt, it was authentic, and it was service oriented. It's like it's a real communication from a caring place that says, how can I help? How can I serve? And that's even taught me how to do that. Gee, Dan, how can I help? How can I serve? What are we doing? So I think hospitality is not just for the industry. I think it's for the human being, as an experience. But I certainly, in my experience in the hospitality business, as I've been a customer in that for many, many years, and I'm a serious road warrior, and have been for many years. That to me was hospitable. I could tell when they cared. I could tell when it was an authentic communication. Hey, we don't have that. I'm so sorry. And, I'm going to try to do what I can do to fix this, to make this right, to make it okay for you. And service oriented, called, how do I serve you? What do you need? And how can I help in that process? Not that I have all the answers, but I'm going to be authentically trying to do my best because I care and I want to be of service. I mean, how could you get more hospitable than that?
I agree. And I think, and you've said this over and over, like with getting things done, we all do all parts of that at different levels of efficiency and effectiveness of the whole system, from capturing to engaging and reviewing and all things in between. And I think one of the things why I was drawn to have you here also is, if you're appropriately engaged with everything in this trusted system, then it's much easier to be creative, open-hearted, and heartfeltly attentive to others, so that you can be in a place of service, not just as a hotel server, but even as a guest walking in. Because I'm also learning that hospitality is really a two-way street. But but how to be ultimately engaged properly with another human in front of you, all that other noise kind of has to shut down, don't you think?
Well, has to is a big word, Dan. Or a big phrase. Come on. The degree to which it does shut down is the degree to which you can be more present in your communications
Mm.
and conversations. Yeah, but you're right. It is a two-way street. I need to be honest when I walk up at the front desk. Like, hey, guys, my room is too close to the elevator. And I don't like the noise. Can we change that? That has to be an authentic conversation from me to them, so that they understand how to engage with that appropriately.
As you were saying that, it reminded me, I just read this article that an industry leader within hospitality, his name is Raul Leal. He is the CEO of SH Hotels. So they have like the Baccarat Hotel, the One Hotels, all this. And it was, I don't remember what it was exactly called, but it was the idea of basically, it's okay to do nothing. It's okay to take a nap. It's okay to restore, recharge. And there's been this other interesting avenue that's percolating about wellness and health throughout these conversations that I've been having. And I was really struck yesterday when someone was asking, hey, I'm stressing myself over this or whatever. And you're like, take a nap, go for a walk, give yourself permission to do nothing and restore. That's shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah. But that's a lot of what the hospitality business can afford people, or can deliver to them with high value. Come here, you get a chance to unhook. I mean, that's a lot of the marketing pitch these days, for a lot of the properties out there. Here's a way to get away. Here's a way to unhook. Here's a way to do that. So yeah, no, that's a cool thing.
When you talked about the cat food a minute ago, and just, hey, write it down on a Post-it note, capture it. There's this idea of, and you've shared with me and other people, that our brain can only remember 4 things at once. Capturing is a great way to get things out of your head, compartmentalize it. And I've actually seen it work in our hospitality industry, because again, like you said, we all do these things. But there was a really well-known famous general manager from the Four Seasons in San Francisco, which was the Clift. Then he went to DC. Then he came back to San Francisco and worked at a Four Seasons there. I think it was the Millennium. And I remember walking around the property with him, and he had like a note card that he would just capture every little thing that he saw that wasn't quite right, that the frontline employees were missing. And he was picking up little wrapper from the ground, noticing fingerprints. He wouldn't address it right there. And I think what I love about getting things done as well is what he would do is become really close with the frontline employees, the customer facing. Then he would capture all this, compartmentalize it, and then appropriately engage with it with that person's manager. So that, hey, let's take this as a learning, and how do we prevent this from happening? What kind of rhythms and structure can we prepare around this?
Yeah, no, fabulous. And I'm a huge Four Seasons fan. At some point, Catherine, my wife, and I said, our ideal scene would be to be able to unhook from the world and just live in Four Seasons hotels around the world and just go from one to the other. Another great story, by the way, which I'll share with you. And I'm going to mention a woman's name right now that you should all know. She's got a new book coming out. Her name is Nancy Sherman. Nancy, Nanci, Sherman, Sherman, well known to be one of the top boutique hotel managers. And she was, at the time, I was doing public seminars, and I was doing a public seminar at the new Hilton Hotel in Miami, the Airport Hilton. That was the flagship Hilton Hotel at the time. This is got back in the early 90s, or when, I forget when that was. And so I was doing seminars there, and Nancy happened to be the head of of whatever you call that, the people who manage the events going on in the hotel. And it was funny because one of the Hiltons was getting married. One of the younger Hiltons was getting married, and they wanted to then do the event at the Airport Hilton in Miami because it was the flagship. So all that was going to happen. And she said it was fascinating to watch the staff knowing that a Hilton was going to show up that the Hiltons were going to show up. She said, what they started to notice, they never noticed before. Oh my God, we need to clean that up. We need to clean that up. We need to clean that up. So, sort of an interesting management technique is never let your staff know when you're going to show up, because then they may consider, wow, what if he or she shows up? What are they going to see? And you start to see things through their eyes, through a different horizon or a different standard, essentially, in terms of that. So I thought that was a fascinating story about just standards in a hotel, and how you manage that. So the fact that your guy, you would walk around and even do that and have those conversations, sort of up the standards for people to be aware of those kinds of things. So he didn't have to do that more than once to say, I might do it again.
Yeah. And I think that also comes into effect, like to tie it all together with that, the weekly review, or because if you can almost, in a way, as you're reviewing whatever you're doing, almost think about it as, hey, here's a checklist. This is all the things that we need to do. And hey, in a hotel, it could be one of the Hiltons are coming, or in a business, it could be like a trigger list to just go through and help get everything out of your head, that
it's
you
all
don't
checklist.
have those surprises. Yeah.
Everything's a checklist. Your calendar is a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a check. Anything you need to check to locate yourself in space and time, to feel comfortable about what you're doing and what you're not doing. Come on, Atul Gawande's fabulous book, The Checklist Manifesto, was just an incredible book, written as a surgeon, about how many more lives would be saved if surgeons actually used checklists.
I read that book, and I think it starts with a horrible story about how, like, someone chopped off the wrong leg, a surgeon chopped off the wrong leg. So they put in these checklists to actually confirm multiple times that.
And have you washed your hands? Excuse me. And they say, the pilots use checklists and surgeons don't, because the pilots are in the plane. Believe me, if you had to operate on yourself, you'd have a checklist.
Totally. There's so many of those great, I call them business porn books, that are just amazing. And that book is definitely at the top. And I read that one, and it was so engaging. It sounds, for those of you who don't like those books, it sounds like, oh, it's about checklists, but it's really powerfully written, very engaging. And again, it helped change processes within my businesses. Right. What's interesting about him is I read that book and I was so drawn to it that I was at this bookstore in Menlo Park, Kepler's, Menlo Park, California. I think that's actually like Jerry Garcia started playing guitar there with the Warlocks before the Grateful Dead started. But there was a book there. I can't remember the name that he wrote. It was at the checkout. It was about being a death or something like that. I don't remember the title. I'm going to put it in the show notes, but I picked it up because I just read Checklist Manifesto, and it was basically about how death is okay. When we get sick, it's okay to die well and not be afraid of it. And like, instead of spending all of this money towards the end of someone's life to try and fight the inevitable, like, how do we embrace and walk to death? And I was so incredibly surprised to have picked that book up and read it. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. But my dad got really sick right around then as well. And I'm so glad that I read that book when I read it by accident, because it really helped me understand the whole process of death and dying. And just also, it's okay to be present and aware.
Oh, wonderful. Atul's a great guy. He's a GTD. I asked him if I could interview him. He said, David, I just feel like I'm such an amateur at GTD. I'd be too embarrassed. So
he considers himself an amateur
at GTD. I don't know. I don't know why. So we didn't further the conversation, but I knew he knew what this methodology was and he bought into it. So, yeah. I attribute it to him, because checklist, my God, everything's a checklist. How many things do you need to get out of your head so you can check it? Anybody who ever reads a recipe book or a cookbook is looking at checklists. Doesn't mean you have to do everything on the checklist or even do it the way the checklist says, but you just make sure you don't miss something that you don't want to miss. Did you put enough salt in there? Yeah, but then you can then use whatever creative Indian spice you want to, but make sure you don't forget this piece or that piece or that piece. And so anybody who uses a calendar, who uses recipes, who uses it, they're already using checklists. So it's like, what's the big deal?
Going back to that idea of those business porn books, right? Sorry, I keep bringing that up. Did you ever read a book
I
called
love that idea. I haven't heard that before, Dan. So
Well, I think that
I'll
your
probably
book is
steal
definitely,
that.
you're in the
Steal that
business
from you.
porn shelf. Like your books are prominently displayed on my
Well,
business porn
wait a
shelf.
minute. I have to do a sidebar on this. 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know, somewhere, some guy in London does this. It's a podcast or some sort of a column that he writes, and he does every year. He does the business, the business BS bookshelf. So it's like the things you need to have on your book. You don't have to read them. You just need to have them on your bookshelf. So when people walk into your office, you say, "Oh, you got that? Oh, you have that book." And my book made it to his list. He says, "So." I thought, well, that was one accolade I've never really had before.
I love it. Well,
I'm gonna
yeah.
be on the BS book list shelf. Yeah.
Well, the BS, but well, I'd prefer to have you on the business porn bookshelf myself. It's more exciting.
Okay.
So Atul, he also, the name of that book, I had to look it up. It's called Being Mortal, and it's fantastic. But another book that would go on there, and another reason why I love doing these conversations on defining hospitality, it's called The E-Myth Revisited. Have you read that one?
No.
Okay. Well, basically, it's kind of checklisty, but it takes a story of a hotelier somewhere Central California coast, and he was so inspired by staying at this one hotel. I don't think he ever named the hotel, but he basically, the business owner who ran the hotel, I think wanted to exit out or something. So he basically, but he loved this hotel so much, he created processes and systems and everything so that everything that he did to make every guest feel comfortable was easily repeatable and trainable by his teams. And that's what I love about this, because if you look at hospitality, it's really just about serving, communicating, and it's transferable to every single industry, every kind of business. It's all about, like, how can we just be better humans and make those around us feel appreciated and appropriately engaged.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is all human stuff, and I guess in the hospitality industry, the more you translate real human stuff down to practical operational practices, the better you are. I feel like, when I walk into Four Seasons, people go, "Oh my God," especially if they know me or can look it up and go, "Oh, David Allen, nice to see you." And especially when those are real communications, and that they have the freedom to make that real communication, because they've got 16 clients on hold over there, and the world banging on the door about X, Y, and Z. If they can stop and say, "Those are all parked where they need to be parked. Let me now focus on you, because I can go back to where those parking lots are at the appropriate time." And I think that's the critical issue. That's a lot of what GTD is about, is being able to put placeholders for all the things that you have your attention on, and appropriate placeholders, meaning that that you or the appropriate person will get back to those at the appropriate time, so they don't have to be spinning around in that subliminal, ambient anxiety that most people live in.
And I'm so glad you said ambient anxiety, because that was a really powerful concept you had the other day when someone was saying, "Hey, I fail at this part of the GTD methodology constantly." And then you said, "Well, that's because you're addicted to ambient anxiety. Work out that muscle of trying that thing and get it to the point of, and really recognize how you feel and how you're engaged and how you're in that flow state, and get addicted to that feeling."
Correct.
That was really powerful. And so for that ambient anxiety, and I know you're not really coaching people anymore. You have a legion of coaches around the world that are coaching people, but is there a great story you can share about breaking someone's addiction to ambient anxiety?
Not really, because it's a gradual process for people.
Mhm.
It's not like they wake up with an epiphany about that and get it overnight. But pretty much everybody I've coached who started to implement some version of what this methodology is starts to some degree, raise the bar in terms of how much of that stress or ambient anxiety they're willing to tolerate. They know they don't have to anymore. So again, kind of a sidebar story, but it does have a point. Uh, at some point, I was doing a seminar, and somebody came up and said, "David, I'm so excited. This is so great." I said, "Well, tell me about it. Give me some feedback." He said, "Well, it's like you let me know that heaven exists. I don't think I'm going to do what I need to do to get into heaven, but I'm really glad to know it's there." So, if nothing else, to know that there's a way out of your ambient anxiety. Whether you decide to do that or not, it's up to you. Maybe you love the spin. Maybe you love the stress. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that turns you on. I have no agenda or judgment about any of that. That's up to you. I'm just saying, if you want to get rid of it or lessen it, here's ways you do that. You get rid of the stuff that's taking up cognitive space and then creating subliminal spin that's timeless inside your head, and just get that out of your head. And to do that, so people have done that more or less. Overall, it'd be hard to say somebody who's done it totally. There are probably a few out there, who sort of really get this. But it takes a lot of forms. One of a long time champion of my stuff and good friend, senior, very, very senior guy at HP at Hewlett Packard. Weekly, he brings his staff in and shows them his mind map of his world, what's on his mind right now. He does a total view so that you guys know what my priorities are, what I'm dealing with. So it's easier for you to make decisions when I have to give you the freedom to make a decision right now. You don't have to come to me. You'll know kind of what's going on in my world. So there's a view of essentially transparency and a way of objectifying the things that have our attention and how much value that may have, not only for ourselves, obviously for ourselves, but even for people around you. What's got your attention? Why? There's no better question to ask than that. I don't care if we're flying to Jupiter in 100 years. We get our staff together and go, "Hey guys, what's got our attention right now? What's not on cruise control? On our way to Jupiter."
Yeah.
Right? So the capture step is a universal step. This is not something I just made up. It's something I recognize that you have to do if you want to then appropriately engage with the stuff that's got your attention spinning around inside that terrible office called your mind.
And the capture idea and walking around with a piece of paper or however I need to capture, that definitely on my journey, ambient anxiety lowered tremendously. But the other Jedi trick that you beat the drum on constantly, and again, there's like all these different phases of GTD, but it's really that idea, the notion of clarifying. Because when you said cat food before, okay, cat food, it's captured, but that cat food could just sit there. Is it my cat is allergic to food and I need to change it? Is it I need to go to the store, I need to log on my computer, I need to do this? And it's really taking all those captured ideas and realizing not just putting a verb in front of it, but what needs to happen. But the real thing was I had so many things on my lists that were to-dos, but they were really projects. And it really needed to be blown out in a mind map and think about what all this is so that I could plan it out and boil it down to the next actions. Then I was like, oh my God, I feel free and clear and creative and powerful.
Well, that's appropriate engagement. It's not about finishing the project. It's about making sure you finish your thinking about it. And your thinking involves two key components: outcome desired, action step required. And you're not born doing that. That's a cognitive muscle that you need to train.
I agree. And there was training, but it also And I love the idea. And I don't remember you writing about ambient anxiety in the books. Is that a phrase you use a lot?
No, so well, fairly new, even
Okay.
since I wrote. I don't know if in the new edition in 2015 where I used that phrase or not, but even since then, I realized that overwhelm is not the real issue. It's the ambient anxiety that people tolerate.
Yeah. And actually, you were on a podcast with a friend of mine, Chloe Carmichael, who was also a guest on this one as well, because she is all about anxiety and listening to that and learning from it. And what I found in developing and building and always evolving this system, it tamps down that ambient anxiety. So I'm not getting the rush awake at night, or I'm not like, oh, my heart's not skipping a beat about I forgot to do something, because it's all there. And the power is when everything is there and captured and in the place, I'm actually making a choice of doing it or not doing it. And it almost like gives me the power to not have that anxiety, because I know it's there. I'm not going to forget it. And I'll get to it when I have the energy or the time.
And the reminder.
And the reminder. Yeah.
If you don't have the reminder somewhere you trust, your brain won't let it go. See, your brain has to trust that your system is better than it is before it lets go.
Another thing on the system, look, we all do all of these things. And for those listeners who don't know GTD, getting things done, is there
are there people out there that don't know what this is?
Surprisingly, yes, because I'm like, have you heard of this? And I've sent your book to so many people, I cannot tell you. I've sent these little pocket wallets to so many people, I cannot tell you. Because in a way, I know what's driving you and why you're doing what you're doing is because you want to take this methodology and implement it, have other people implement it so that the world becomes a better place, right? And that's really powerful. And I think that if there's any gift I could ever give someone, it's like, hey, shut down your ambient anxiety a little bit. I can help you. Everyone's like, I just need more time. I need more time. I'm like, do you? We all have the same amount of time. We're all given the same amount of time.
Yeah, you'd have more time to have more ambient anxiety. Yeah.
Absolutely. When you think about you in a dojo, when did you start learning karate?
1968.
How old were you?
I was born in 1945, so do the math. I don't know, 23.
23. So did you, that idea of kind of that mind like water, being appropriately engaged and clear and centered, did you have any notion of that before karate, or karate just taught you the hard way?
By the end of high school, I'd read all of Suzuki and Alan Watts in terms of Zen. So I was already aware of sort of the clear space idea, as best as a teenager could understand what that meant. But I was somehow very attracted to the aesthetics of all that. That's why I decided to engage in learning karate. I wasn't interested in fighting. I was interested in the idea of a martial art. What was because there was such a close connection between Zen and the martial arts. So I said, well, and I had a friend who was really good at karate, offered to teach me. And so that's how I got engaged in that. But that's, there were several other factors where I was always curious about models. I was always curious about things that affected our thinking and so forth. That's why I was a history major, a philosophy and history major in college. And why did people think the way they thought during that time? And what was the paradigm that was driving them, and so forth. So I've always had a fascination and curiosity about models and how those models affect our perceptions and our performance. So I guess all that was sort of involved, and as all this kind of came together over the years.
Mm-hmm. And, as you were on your journey to kind of understanding that and also creating this system and disseminating it to the world. I guess before GTD, and you would know better than me, it's kind of like that Franklin Covey type. Here's an organizer, work within this thing. But what I love about yours also, it's like totally agnostic, because it's really about the thinking and then the process, and you can use any tool. And so often we all get so caught up in the tool that we lose sight of the practice, right? So as you were developing this and kind of getting it all to come together, like what were some of your inspirations to be a productive human and keep track of everything? And what mistakes did you make until you arrived at GTD?
I don't know, Dan. That's such a big question. There were so many things, it's a very, very long story. I'm 76, a lot of history, in the development of all this. But I think in the early days, to try to give you some sort of a simple answer, I got involved in the sort of personal growth movement. Dropped out of graduate school and got involved in meditation, spiritual practices, and the personal growth movement. And I was in Berkeley in '68. So heady times. And of course, that was the time when EST and actualizations and LifeSpring and a lot of the personal growth movements were showing up out of Esalen and other places, where a lot of things were being sort of curated and accumulated into sort of personal growth training, where you go for 5 days, intensives, and so forth. And I got involved in that, and was one of the first people involved in something called Insight Seminars, which is still around, and became a facilitator of that. And I had a lot of great stuff to learn, and a lot of my own personal transformational experiences happened out of being involved with that stuff. It was kind of like life 101. You were never taught how to give feedback and receive it, appropriately. You were never taught, things you need, how to be honest with people you cared about, and yada yada yada. And I mean, just all those good things that these days are kind of taken for granted in terms of the, self-help movements out there, that have been around for now 40 years, in spades. So I got involved in that, and that then showed me that there were things you could learn very quickly. You didn't have to change yourself so much, but if you learned some techniques and learned how to approach things appropriately, you could really transform your experience. One of those pieces in that, by the way, so it was a small piece of a whole 5-day training, was about agreements. What happens when you keep an agreement? What happens when you don't keep an agreement? Right? Internally. And keep an agreement, you'll feel better, you feel wonderful. Don't keep an agreement, you're going to disintegrate trust with yourself or anybody else that agreement involves. So interestingly, the whole GTD process is about clarifying your agreements, mostly with yourselves, but a lot of it include other people. So there were pieces of what I learned in the personal growth movement. And then, we designed a kind of a funky version of a kind of a time management training about using some sort of a planner to keep track of your agreements and so forth. And then discovered a great paper-based tool out of Europe, out of Denmark, called the Time System. We called it Time Design in the US, and became the first distributor of that because it was the classiest, coolest tool to be able to manage all that stuff. But I also had the real experience of how much difference it made to keep track of your agreements and to make sure you didn't break them, or if you had to change them, that you could renegotiate them. So keep an agreement, finish the agreement, don't make the agreement, or renegotiate the agreement, creates a whole lot of clarity. So that was something I learned in that sort of self-development, grow yourself, learn who you are, kind of process back in the 60s and 70s. And that turned into the fact that we kind of developed a little training around this that had a lot to do, that the corporate world was starting to be interested in, because it started to be interested then in that sort of time management idea, which ultimately is self-management. So I wound up kind of moving from, okay, here's something you need to get clear about. But by the way, here's a way you can apply that to your business corporate environment that would give you more room and more space. Now, I couldn't have said that in 1982, when I sort of created my own first little consulting practice, and then started to take some of these techniques and started to put them together in a model that I could work with clients to have them do this. And then, it worked, created a little successful small consulting business dealing with small businesses and friends and entrepreneurs. Then a big guy in the corporate training world saw what I was doing and said, "Oh my God, we need that in the whole corporation. Can you please design a training around this? That we can reach a lot of people with the methodology you've come up with." So I did, and it worked. It was highly successful, and 1,000 managers and executives as a pilot program in Lockheed in 1983, 84 at Burbank. And it was so successful, I found myself thrust into the corporate training world with what I'd come up with. Could have fooled me. I've never had any formal traditional education in business psychology or time management. Mine's street smarts. That's all
And now
this came
you're
from.
a guru, and you've become a guru at it. You become an
But
overnight success after 40 something years.
yeah, yeah, but probably because I didn't have any preconditioning about what this was supposed to be. I didn't have any. It's like, well, what works? What works? What produces clarity? What produces this thing? And so I didn't have any sort of preconditioned information or training about what that was supposed to be. So I suppose that's why my stuff wound up being. I thought I was the last person, the guy to learn this stuff. I thought people making a lot more money than I'd see in my life, that they'd already figured this out. And wrong answer. They were the ones most hungry for this.
Totally.
Because the people most attracted to this methodology are the people who need it the least. They're the most organized, professional, organized, aspirational, successful people already. It's just they've come up to here. They have no more room. They know the value of system. They've got one. They know the value of organizing. They know the value that they can produce because they've produced it to get them to where they are already. They know if they had more room, they could produce more. They just got no more room, and there's no more space. So a lot of my coaching over 2,000, thousands and thousands of hours with some of the best and brightest one-on-one at their desk, coaching them with this stuff, which is just by clearing the psyche, clearing it up. They just didn't know how to do that. So I taught them how to do that. What they did with that space was up to them.
Yeah.
My job was not to give them input about what they should be thinking about. My job was to get them clear so they could think freely and creatively.
I think, and that's another thing, this idea of a mind sweep or a brain dump and just clearing out the RAM in the brain. And I don't know if there's a trigger list somewhere. I'll see if I can find a trigger list. I want to put it in the show notes, because
there is somewhere.
I'll find it. I'll put it in there. But anyone listening, I would just say, like, set an hour or 2 hours and just a clean white piece of paper, a bunch of paper, and follow this mind sweep. It's crazy when you get everything out of your head, and that's the fastest way to scratch at that clear whiteboard of creativity.
Indeed.
So I challenge everyone to try that and just see what happens. Then there's a whole other thing of like, okay, well, now what do I do with all that? Then you can get the book or the audio book or whatever, and you'll walk them through it there.
And by the way, you don't have to even do that, guys. Once you get that stuff dumped out of your head, just look at each one and say, is that something I need to move on? Yes or no? If no, trash it, put it in a reference somewhere, or say, let me incubate that and review it in 3 weeks, right? If it is something you need to act on, then say, well, great. What would the next action look, sound, or feel like? If I was only going to finish that, what would I do? An email to send, a website to serve, something to talk to my partner about. What's the next thing I would need to do on that? And by the way, if that one action won't finish it, then say, well, what's the project? And define the outcome that you're after. That one action's not going to finish, so keep track of that. And then organize that thinking in some sort of appropriate list that you see. Here's the errands I need to run. Here's the things I need to talk to my wife or my husband about, or my partner about, or here's the things I need to surf the web about, or whatever. So this ain't rocket science unless you're building rockets.
Yeah, and then you can still use it.
And
because
if anybody listening to this just got what I just said, You don't have to go read all these things. You don't have to do that. Although if you do, you'll see there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And building this in as a more habitual behavior and a more systematic behavior. Yeah, you might get inspired for an hour or two or three and then have a cool thing, and then you're going to fall off the wagon very fast unless you build in some sort of a systematic process and habitual process about doing this kind of thinking, doing this kind of capturing, doing kind of clarifying and organizing consistently as opposed to just once. I still do this, guys. I'm 76. I still have stuff I've just thrown into my in tray right here. I don't know yet what I need to do with this, but I know I need to do something with it. So I printed it out and threw it in here. So I'm still in the same game, and it will be probably till I die.
Yeah.
So it's just how you keep the cognitive space clear. Because I'm a freedom junkie, guys. Come on. You meet me, you're going to see one of the most addicted to spontaneous, don't fence me in, kind of guys you'll ever meet. People often think, they're so surprised they meet me. They think, well, God, you've got to be the most anal retentive, OCD kind of guy ever. It's like, not. And
Yeah.
you're gonna meet somebody who said the reason I love spontaneity and creativity and just the freedom to do this, that's how I came up with all this, so I could stay there.
And that's really powerful, because
Well, stay there. You can stay there if you want to just go get a rice bowl and cave and get a little paintbrush and whatever, and maybe that'd be your life. But if you want to, I like to maintain the apartment we just bought in Amsterdam and my artwork and my wine that I love to drink, so, and gorgeous wife and two wonderful dogs that we work with. So to maintain my lifestyle, I still need to manage all that stuff so that I have room to practice my flute and to practice my acrylic painting, which I'm learning to do now. So, all those are, anyway, I'm preaching to the choir probably for a lot of the folks listening to this, but I'm reminding you about a lot of stuff that you already do. I'm just hoping I'm putting it in a context where you see it in a more, as Dan framed it to begin with. We all do this, but most people don't do this in some sort of consistent, templated way that then allows you to then sort of live that life. I don't even think about this stuff. I just do it. But it's like I brush my teeth and I take a shower, like you do too. And the reason is, if you don't, you feel uncomfortable. So if I don't do what we've been talking about, I just feel uncomfortable. I got ambient anxiety, going to start to spin again, which I hate.
When you talked about the flute, the painting, and the fun, joyous, spontaneous things, there's another powerful idea where, some people know that they want to have fun and live, laugh, love, but for you, you shared this thing of like, hey, and it's a powerful idea. It's how do you appropriately engage with that fun and joy? And you had a really cool example of like, hey, make a project out of it, do a thing, just fuck it up, just try something, but put that thing in your horizon of focus and just have fun.
Yeah. No, I taught myself to play the flute 30 years ago when I was traveling by myself, and I thought I wanted to get back into music again, and that was the only thing I could travel with. It was easily travelable in a suitcase and had enough solo music you could play on the flute. So I taught myself to play the flute, 30 years ago. At some point it got stolen, and it was a fabulous flute, and I didn't have the money at the time to come back and get as good a flute again, so I just kind of let it go. And I've got a kind of 2.5 year quota of my hobbies that I explore, and then I pretty much whatever. So I let that go. And then about 3 years ago, I went, oh, geez, I should get back on the flute again. One of the first things I did was put on my project list, get new flute. Right? So this sort of creative idea became a very real thing. Okay, if I get that, that's going to help me start to get back into that. I don't have to have some sort of I should be doing more music again. Yeah, how are you going to do that? What's going to trigger you to be engaged in that process again? So anyway, the hospitality business, you say, wow, we should. One of my clients at one point was the Marriott in, I don't know, it was Cancun, no, somewhere in Mexico. Acapulco, no, no. One of the islands, one of the Caribbean islands. And they had just created a new project called, they needed to create a new bar out on the beach. And so actually I came in and I worked with their senior team. So, hey guys, what's the project? We need to have a new bar out there. Great. Where's that? Who owns that? What's that? What is that thing to do? So somebody had a creative idea that was going to help, with their business, was to be able to do that. But nobody had yet sat down and said, specifically, here's the outcome we want. Great. Wonderful. Who owns that? Who's going to do that? Who's committed? Are you guys committed to do this? Who's doing it? Great. And so what's the next step? What do you need? Oh, you got it? Great. What's the next step? Are you going to figure that out? You let us know by when. So this whole process, GTD is not a cult. It's not something, it's good business. It's about outcome and action thinking. So certainly in the hospitality business, especially when the pandemic eased, the restrictions are being eased, and you have a little bit more room to think about, okay, now how are we going to take advantage of the fact that we may have more people coming in? We may have more access to right now. What new things should we do? What cool things? Anybody doing that kind of thinking? But at some point, you're going to have to go, okay, so there's the brainstorming aspect of that, and there's the kind of visioning aspect of that. Oh, that'd be really cool if we could, or here's what we need to do, or here's our ideal scene for by the end of 2022 or 2023. And then go, well, great. So what are the things we need to do? These are the horizons of focus that I identified in GTD. So at a team level, certainly at a hospitality level, like, well, okay, what do we need to do that we're not currently doing? What's not on cruise control right now? What could we do that we're not currently doing that's not on cruise control right now? And I think those would be key questions for your industry.
I love that. And it's also, it's outcome and action, but also what I heard you say in there, it's also like assigning and embracing accountability as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you graduate this from the personal to the team level. So,
totally. David, if you, well, I gave you, you step into a time machine right now, and you're going back to your 23-year-old self, and
my God, that was 53 years ago. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, you're better at math than me.
You're asking a lot.
But I want you to go, and I want you to stand in front of yourself, putting on that gi for the first time. Okay. And what advice does your current self give your 23-year-old self as you're putting on that gi for the first time?
Keep going, stay engaged, relax, trust your the inner voice that you don't know that you even have yet, much less how to recognize it. But it will be there.
I love that. David, this has been so incredible. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about GTD, how do they contact you?
Well, so our home base is, gettingthingsdone.com. So you go there, you'll see a lot of what this is about. If you're interested in more in-depth training and or coaching based upon what country you're in, you can click under training and coaching and then type in your country. If you're in the US and Canada, what's now Crucial Learning, they were Vital Smart's a great partner we have doing trainings, public trainings or whatever about this, more in depth. GTD Focus is our sort of senior coaching partner that we have for the US and Canada. So you would find there if that's what you're interested in, or if you're in anywhere else around the world, just type in your country and you'll see who the local partner that we've certified. And this is not a mail order certification. This is rigorous certification to okay our coaches and trainers in these regions. And that's where you can really take this in a lot more depth. If you just want to kind of surf around, just go to gettingthingsdone.com/YouTube, and you'll see my web talks. You'll see my dozens of my sort of 2-minute and 6-minute or whatever interviews or things like that, where you can just get a little more sort of my take on all this stuff. Those would be fast ways. We have a free newsletter, so if you go to the website, I think there's a way you can click on that, and if you want to sort of stay in touch with what we do and how we do it.
Wonderful. Well, David, I want to thank you for your time. And I know you don't want anyone to visit Amsterdam because you want to keep it a big secret, but I'm going to go there, and I'd love to have a nice beer or a meal with you. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and just your inspiration over all these years.
Anytime, Dan. No, it's been fun. Yeah.
Awesome. And also, I want to thank our listeners. I hope that this talk between David and myself, a hero of who's helped me get to where I am, it helped change your idea of hospitality and helped foster a more heartfelt, authentic way to communicate, or at least scratched at that and leaves you wanting more. So thank you, everyone. If it did inspire you, please share it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.